Yeah, so welcome to Kentucky again, and we've got a lot of great things around here. Horses are big. If you drive around Lexington and Versailles and a little bit in Frankfurt, you'll see some of the thoroughbreds, and Justify is in Versailles, I think, you know, the new Triple Crown winner. Is that right? Yep, Justify. We got American Pharoah still there. Triple Crown winners right here, just 10 miles from here. It's really amazing, actually, and I was pretty impressed when I first came here, too. I've been here about 4 years, and still impressed when I look at a day like this out on the hills, and especially here at the farm and other farms around Kentucky. A lot of small-scale farms, which really a lot of folks in this room are small-scale farmers as well, and that's who we largely cater to. So I'm going to talk a little bit about indoor shrimp farming and why you'd want to do it and how you might do it and what we do here at K-State. So why would you want to grow shrimp? Well, you know, a lot of people look at the shrimp market and they say, well, there's tons of shrimp. I can buy pounds and pounds of shrimp at Walmart and Kroger and whatever your local grocery store is, and that's true, but what you can't buy is fresh shrimp, and you can't buy shrimp that you really know is a high-quality product and that you want to feed to your family. And I think that's what a lot of us in this room are interested in tapping into. It's the number one seafood, but almost all of it in the United States and a lot of the other countries that folks in here are from, especially the developed countries, is imported. And there's some problems with that, you know, and even domestic supplies in the United States is inconsistent and dwindling. That supply keeps going down, and the demand for healthy seafood is going up. And so why would you want to grow marine shrimp, especially in a landlocked state? Now, that's an interesting thing, too, that we're here in a completely landlocked state. We don't even border a Great Lake or anything, and we're here talking about marine shrimp. So I don't know if this has been done too many times in the past, actually. And so the marine shrimp has been bred over decades, many decades, and some of you have been involved in that, to be fast-growing, disease-resistant, and really just a real hardy animal that's suitable to intensive aquaculture applications. And it's the most popular shrimp in the world now, and it's the most popular even in the U.S. and other developed countries at most supermarkets. That's true in most developed countries anyway. People are familiar with the appearance and the texture of the shrimp. But what we're really interested in doing is growing shrimp indoors, which is kind of a newer concept. A lot of our shrimp throughout the world is, of course, grown in large outdoor ponds in areas with warm climates. And what we can do if we grow them indoors, though, is if we can develop a system that we can reliably produce shrimp with, then we can grow them practically anywhere, because we have buildings all over the world like this one and other insulated buildings and greenhouses and things that allow us to control temperature largely, also sunlight and other factors that are really important for shrimp growth. And so having that control really allows consistency. And some of the surveys we've done with consumers and chefs and supermarket owners is that they complain about seafood supply being inconsistent because it comes from coastal regions that are affected by storms or by seasonality in terms of fisheries opening and closing and things like that. Fresh, never frozen shrimp is really hard to get in most places, and so that is a premium product. And you know, there are people that say that shrimp producers in the U.S. and developed countries could compete in commodities too, and I won't argue that, but what I'm thinking is that a lot of this is niche marketing in places like the U.S., where you have people who are willing to pay a premium for a higher quality product, and we can grow them any time of the year if we do it indoors. So you have to use recirculating aquaculture systems to do this probably. There's a few places. If you're on the coast, maybe not, but mostly, especially in places like Kentucky, we're talking about RAS, or recirculating aquaculture systems. And that means very low water exchange rates so that we can conserve that salt and conserve the heat also in the systems. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. RAS has been used for years in aquariums and other applications, fish hatcheries. And what we're looking at is a variety of different systems primarily. This has been one of the questions of a lot of my research lately as well. What's the best system to grow the shrimp in? Clear water recirculating systems, biofloc systems, or maybe a hybrid of these two different strategies. And so The clear water wrasse is usually something like what you see at a public aquarium, where you're really clearing up the water. You can see the animals really well, but it requires a lot of filtration, which is an expense. It requires a lot of equipment. And there wouldn't be much supplemental feed because you're really trying to strip everything out of the water. But what you get is a lot better control. You're really taking all those microorganisms out of the water that would contribute to a lot of fluctuations in water quality, dissolved oxygen, pH, and things like that. And so that's really the big benefit, and also potentially a lower risk of disease. Whereas the biofloc, you have less filtration. You allow a lot of particulates to accumulate in the water, and it looks real turbid, and that provides some supplemental food for the animals. That is your biofilter, having all those bacteria and algae and everything else in the water column with the animals. And so, but this I think gives you a little less control over the system, because now you're also managing this microbial community in the water column with the animals as well as the animals. And my experience is that a lot of farmers we've worked with, it makes things a little bit more complicated, and you really have to understand that water quality to a much greater extent and pay more attention to it. But there's potentially more supplemental food available for the animals, and again, less filtration, so less startup costs. What we've been looking at a lot is kind of trying to hybridize these two systems and incorporate benefits of the Clearwater wrasse and the biofloc system by including a biofilter, an external biofilter, to do a lot of that water quality management. That's what takes out your ammonia and your nitrite, hopefully. And it can be as simple as a 50-gallon drum here for a lot of the small-scale farmers, and I know a lot of you have various sizes of farms, but for small-scale folks, something as simple as a 50-gallon drum could work. And we don't try to get all the solids out of the water. Shrimp don't need to be in clear water. You don't need to be able to see the shrimp, and they don't need to be able to see each other or anything like that. So we leave some turbidity in the water with the animals, so we're providing that biofiltration, but also maybe that supplemental nutrition in the water with the animals as well. Hybrid systems, again, a lot of the farmers we work with don't have a lot of experience in aquaculture, and so if that's the case, then we have seen some success with this, even starting off with very little experience. And so they'll set up a biofilter. There's 50-gallon drums. Sorry, Andre, I know this is your picture. Hopefully, yeah, he's working on insulating this space too, I think. We can talk about that later. But homemade filters, small or large-scale farms are using homemade filters a lot of the times. I know there's also some really good off-the-shelf filters, but a lot of these folks are using homemade stuff, and basically for the solids, using settling chambers, which seem to take out a lot of the larger particles, and then foam fractionators that take out a lot of the finer particles. This is one that's homemade that we have at our Production Technologies building, which we'll tour later on this afternoon. So it doesn't have to be real complicated. Insulated space, what that really allows you to do is grow the shrimp year-round. In Kentucky, we get some pretty cold winters. We'll get 4, 5, 6 snow events per year usually, and that usually melts off in between, but we'll get some, quite a few nights down below freezing. And this is an old tobacco barn, and you see a lot of these around Kentucky and other parts of the country where tobacco used to be king. We see hog barns, we see chicken barns, where the industry's changed the technologies that they use, and a lot of farmers are interested in using those spaces that they already have for something else, for a new, in this case, a newer type of agriculture product. And this is an old tobacco barn that is otherwise intentionally poorly insulated, because this is where you would dry your tobacco out. Our farmer in Lexington, who a lot of you toured yesterday, this is the farm that was on the tour yesterday, has come in and insulated this room, put up these panels and put spray foam insulation behind that, put down some gravel, and using very simple off-the-shelf swimming pools to grow shrimp successfully. He's had really pretty good success with production, and growth rates seem to be good. And again, a pretty simple approach, but allowing this new product to be grown right here in Kentucky using some of the existing infrastructure that we already have. Greenhouses are another option. I'm calling these indoor production as well. We'll tour this facility later too. This is a little bit of an introduction to the tours later as well. This is our high tunnel complex, and it's all USDA organic certified inside this fence. We've got a field out here with some hemp growing in it now, and oh, this is an older picture. We have solar panels up here now too that are producing electricity. They're not in this picture though. The greenhouses though are very poorly insulated. These are real cheap high tunnel greenhouses, which are the term high tunnel just means that they're basically pole structures with sheet plastic over them, and no artificial heat. Only solar radiation and passive ventilation is the only way that we heat and cool these things. So a pretty inexpensive structure to build, and we've built some big wood frame tanks. These are about 4,000 gallons each in each of these 4 high tunnels. There's the solar panels. And a lot of this is solar powered. Now in Kentucky, this is seasonal production. We can only get 1 crop per year out of a facility like this because we don't have any supplemental heat, but it's low upfront cost, which is attractive to a lot of farmers. And so what we're looking at is growing shrimp in the warm months, and then potentially a cool weather crop in the cool months. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I'd like to do something like largemouth bass in here as a nursery in the cool months to have stocker fish in the spring for recreational ponds and even food production ponds. And so this is a really good example of integrated agriculture. Half of the greenhouses are row crops. We've got some hemp growing in one that you'll see today, and we've got some hemp out in this field right now too. Real simple. These are biofloc systems. They only have a settling chamber and some homemade foam fractionators on them. And then we've got a lot of our real indoor insulated shrimp farming research that we do. Primarily, well, a lot of it's done rather in the Aquaculture Production Technologies building, which we'll tour this afternoon. And we won't tour the Sustainable Aquaculture Development Laboratory here just because of space. This is actually really crowded, and there's a lot of us to get through there. So unfortunately, we won't be able to go through that. But this is a spray foam insulated old sheet metal building. Again, a structure that a lot of farmers already have on a lot of farms around the country. And we just came in and spray foam insulated it to facilitate year-round shrimp production. And we do a lot of replicated, smaller scale replicated research in here. These are 1 cubic meter tanks, or about 250 gallons. What we do, and there's a lot of different ways, and I talked to a lot of farmers all over the world about aquaculture and shrimp aquaculture, and there are a lot of different ways to do this. That's one point I really want to make. There's a lot of different ways to put shrimp in a tank and make them grow. And I'm not going to say anybody's wrong, and I'm not going to say anybody's right, because I've done it a bunch of different ways. But right now, this is what we do, kind of the accumulation of knowledge, I hope, and where we've gotten to over the years, where I've gotten to at least. And we've got some smaller tanks that we use as nurseries. Again, homemade filters, a settling chamber, and a biofilter. And we'll put the shrimp out in here for about 30 to 45 days after we get them from a hatchery. And that's another topic that's going to be important at this workshop, obviously. And then we've got this 5,000 gallon, or about 20 cubic meter commercial demonstration tank that we use. Now, a lot of farmers are using swimming pools that look very similar to this. This is a fiberglass tank just because it's a little more durable, and wanted something that's going to last a long time. But you could apply this to a swimming pool as well if you wanted to. In this case, we're using a 1 horsepower pump to power everything. We've got it running a fractionator back here. We've got aeration going into a biofilter in the back, and you'll see this on the tour as well. And then we've got an aeration system here inside the tank. We've actually got 3 of these nozzles that inject air into the water. And so that 1 horsepower pump's running everything. And that's a really nice model because it's all inclusive. And then you can have multiple tanks that are all independent of each other. So if one thing fails, you don't lose 4, 5, 6 tanks. It's all localized, and you can deal with it in a localized fashion. We've got a central wall here in the middle of the tank where we pump, and the water's being pumped around that, or it's supposed to be pumped around that. We've got electric heat, which I don't really recommend. If you're going to use electric heat, I think the most efficient thing is a heat pump. We've got some resistance heaters, though, just because that was what was available. We do 3 hand feedings during the day, and we use feeders in the evenings to keep the shrimp eating. Shrimp like to eat pretty consistently, and Craig will talk about that tomorrow, about feeding and how important feeding and feeds are to the process. We normally, well, I'll give you an example, and this is an old example actually, but I've got a robust data set from this. We stocked this tank at 250 shrimp per cubic meter and grew them for 98 days at 20 parts per thousand salinity. And we had some shrimp that jumped out of the tank, and that's why our survival is a little low. But otherwise, really good production values. 24 grams is our goal. That's where you start talking about a jumbo shrimp. Usually that's about a 20 count shrimp, 20 per pound, which is, I think, where people start talking about jumbo. We've got farmers that want to grow them to 26 grams, 28, 30, you know. Exactly where do you stop getting more benefit the longer you grow them? We're not sure exactly yet, but 24 grams is a nice point at least that we normally shoot for. So anyway, we grew 200 pounds of shrimp and gave them out to Kentucky chefs, seafood distributors, and we sold 83 pounds of them at the Franklin County Farmers Market, which is just a few miles from where we are right now. We sold out in an hour and a half. We started at 7 a.m. and sold out in an hour and a half. We did advertise. Farmers markets seem to be a really good way to get your product out to people, and we'll have some more talks about marketing in a little while. But you know, that's a way to get your product out directly to consumers and tell them the story about your product. A lot of our small-scale farmers are really using. There's over 8,000 farmers markets in the United States. And people want to go and hear your story about fresh, never frozen, you know, all natural shrimp with no contaminants and no hormones and non-imported, produced locally, that type of thing. So this is a little lower price than what a lot of our farmers are selling shrimp for, but this is kind of what we started out at. Again, this is an older data set. Our recurring costs are about $5.50 a pound. Bob Rohde is going to talk about this a little bit more, so I'm not going to harp on this anyway. Between us and Purdue, we're estimating probably somewhere between $6 and $9 a pound in an insulated building year-round with some of these inputs. But again, I'll let him handle that in a lot more detail because I'm not the economist. But we asked people what they liked about the shrimp, and that's what I want to illustrate in this table. And so chefs are a little pickier than consumers. There was 5 chefs and 27 consumers, and they generally, number 1 is the best, and number 5 is the worst. And these are the averages plus or minus the standard error, I believe. And, so, you know, we got nothing real bad. I mean, nothing bad at all. Taste is, everybody likes the taste. Chefs are pickier than consumers, okay. But the number one thing that everybody, absolutely every single one of these people, marked as their favorite quality of these shrimp was freshness. And I argue that that's the one thing that really you cannot get from an imported frozen product. These are fresh shrimp, and that really makes them stand out in terms of product quality, at least according to these folks. So looking forward, you know, some of the issues that a lot of our farmers are running into, and I know a lot of you are running into, and we'll talk about tomorrow, is nitrate accumulation. We're reusing this water over and over again in indoor shrimp farming because we want to conserve the salt. That's an expense. A lot of people, I get a lot of questions from people in Europe, in Canada, and some in the U.S. that have problems with discharge permits and things like that. You can't discharge this waste. Municipalities don't want salt in their systems. They don't want the excess nutrients and things like that. So we're trying to reuse this water, and after the nitrate gets pretty high, about 300 milligrams per liter or so, and there's differing opinions on that exactly. I think it has a lot to do with other water quality parameters as well, but we start to see the shrimp growth go down. And if it gets too high, we start to see shrimp mortality as well. So it's an issue, and something that we're really trying to focus a little more on. I've got a grant looking at this for next year primarily, where we're going to do some denitrification. But one of the things we're looking at is plants, and there's been some promising research on this. We're screening a lot of plants. You actually won't see this on the tour today, but we're using some hydroponic studies to screen plants for salt tolerance. Turns out Swiss chard is pretty salt tolerant. This is scurvy grass, which kind of tastes like horseradish, and it's really pretty salt tolerant. Salicornia, some folks are using. There's some interest in some marsh grasses, which is what we have here. Really efficient at taking up nutrients, but you know, what are you going to do with the marsh grass? One idea we have is to feed it to ruminants. We've got some beef cattle actually right here on the farm, and an animal nutritionist who's interested in possibly using some of these marsh grasses to feed to the beef cattle at certain times in their life that's important to them. I don't know a lot about the cattle nutrition, but this has a sea salt profile to it and some other nutritional factors as well. So denitrification is another process we're looking at. We're going to be doing some experiments with that. Sequence batch where you go aerobic back and forth between that and anaerobic conditions in a tank. You got to be careful though, because if you do this, if you go anaerobic, which means you're lowering the oxygen concentration in the water, you can start producing some bad things like ammonia, or much worse, sulfides. So if you smell rotten eggs, don't let that water go back to your shrimp tank. I know that, because that'll kill the shrimp pretty quickly, and I've done it. I've killed a lot of shrimp to give you this presentation, actually. A lot of shrimp had to die for this, so just to appreciate those poor souls. And we're looking at inexpensive salts, too. We have a new project with Auburn and Purdue looking at making our own salt mixtures that are going to be a lot less expensive than some of the off-the-shelf versions that we use currently. And so if we have some cheap salt, then we can discharge the water to a greater extent. Or, if we do end up wasting some water for some reason, it's not as big of a deal. So I think you all have most of this information available either through the program or otherwise, but I'm here to answer questions. So if you have any, let me know. Contact me through email or we have a Facebook page that Charles does a really good job of keeping up with. We're always posting new articles on our KSU Aquaculture Center Facebook page, and keep up with us on there and see what kind of new things we're up to. And so, again, thanks very much for being here. I appreciate it.